Hello, Miss Nguyen here again with our slope-intercept form from table with word problems. Can you imagine if you ever opened one of these videos and it wasn't me? Like I keep saying Miss Nguyen here, like who else would it be here? Surprise. Okay, so these should be nice, short, and sweet. So we are looking at how to find our slope and y-intercept when we have a word problem. And so when we then use the word problem to find our equation and then write a table, right? So for these problems, you will use your knowledge of keywords to write an equation in slope-intercept form from a word problem. Then you will create your own table of points from that equation. So this is kind of opposite order of what we did previously, because previously you would get a table and then have to figure out the slope and the y-intercept from the table to write the equation. Well, now you're basically being given an equation and we have to write our own table. So it's kind of like everything in reverse. Okay. So step one, you want to read the problem and annotate keywords. Remember, I like to circle numbers and underline keywords. If highlighting works better for you, go for it. Step two, using those keywords, write your equation. It's in slope-intercept form. That's y equals mx plus b. And then to make your table, you want to choose 4 values to use for x, and then plug your chosen values into your equation to find the y values. Let me show you what that means. So here's an example. It says, the amount of money Daniel makes, M, per hour, H, is equal to 10.50 times the value of H. Now, sometimes these problems will use variables other than X and Y. So you need to think about, which one is which, as long as you're consistent, right? So remember I was telling you before that X is supposed to be our independent variable. So Y is what changes based on X. That's why Y is the dependent variable, because Y depends on X, not the other way around. And time is pretty much always going to be your X variable, because time doesn't depend on anything. We all depend on time. So that means in this situation, H is going to be the same as X and M is going to be the same as Y. Right? So we need to first figure out our equation. It says the amount of money Daniel makes per hour, so it's M, that's the amount of money he makes, is equal to 10.50 times, it's literally times the value of H. So when we have a variable and a number next to each other, that means we're multiplying them. So we don't have to write 1050 times H or anything, because I think that as we're working with equations, if you write an X like that, it's easy to get confused. So you can either do that, or if you really need to see the multiplication, you can do that, I guess. But you want to be getting out of the habit of using this little X for times with equations. It'll just confuse you later. Okay, so this is a proportional relationship. There's nothing being added or subtracted over here, you know. So that makes this equation much easier for us to figure out. So first thing is we're going to pick some X points. Does not matter what they are for this. We're just practicing. So I like to use really small numbers like this because it makes the multiplication easier. So again, we did not get these from anywhere. We made them up. That's what you get to do. This is our creativity time, right? So what we need to do now is figure out what the y values are for each of these x values. And that's where this equation comes in. Okay, because remember, y depends on x. That's why we decide what x is, and then we figure out what y is going to be based on what we decided that x is. Okay, so for each of these, to find y, or to find m, I guess, you're going to do 10.50 times whatever we decided for h. So here is negative 1. 10.50 times negative 1 is negative 10.50. That's all we have to do. And do this again for the next point. M equals 10.50 times 0. Well, anything times 0 is 0. And we know that 0, 0 is going to be a point because this is a proportional graph. It has to go through the origin, right? So we kind of knew that this would happen. Next one, m equals 10.50 times 1. Yep, that is just 10.50. The last m, 10.50 times 2. My way of doing this with mental math is I know 10, I'll just forget about the 0.5 for a second. 10 times 2 is 20. 0.5 times 2 is 1. You add 20 and 1, and you get 21. That is my little strategy for mental math. But if you want to put that into your calculator instead, that's cool too. Okay. So that was an example of what you're supposed to do with a proportional equation. See, that's much easier because all we had to do was multiply. And that's how we get our y values, and we're done. We have our table. Well, let's look at one where the equation is a little bit more complicated. Okay, example 2 says the value of y is 6 more than the product of x and 3. More than means add. Product means multiply. And like the product of x and 3 means we are multiplying x and 3. So that is 3x. Just like the sum of x and 3 would be 3 plus x, right? So the product of x and 3 means we're multiplying that. So now we can write this. I forgot to circle the y. So y is equal to 6 more than the product of x and 3. So y equals 6 plus 3x. Yeah. Okay. Now, if you wanted this to be more like y equals mx plus b, you could say y equals 3x plus 6 by switching those around. We can do that because these are being added, and you can add numbers in any order. If this was subtraction, we'd have to do something a little different, and you'll see that later. Okay, so that's our equation. Now, we're going to choose some values for x. Even though I really want to be lazy and choose those same numbers, I'm going to do something a little different this time so you can see kind of how you might choose some values. Okay. So we have this. Now we need to figure out what our y values are going to be. So for each of these points, y is equal to 3 times x plus 6. What? So let's give me a second. There we go. Okay. Well, maybe I should have given myself a little bit more space because this is a little more complicated. All right, so I'm going to move this over here. Y equals 3 times 2 plus 6. There we go. Now I have some more space. 3 times 2 is 6. So we have 6 plus 6. That is 12. Next one, y equals 3 times negative 2 plus 6. That is negative 6 plus 6. That is 0. Y equals 3 times 3 plus 6 is 9 plus 6. Use another little mental math trick. You know, 9 plus 1 is 10. So you can take 1 away from the 6 to get 10. And then it becomes 10 plus 5, which is 15. Lastly, y equals 3 times 5 plus 6. And again, if you need, I mean, hopefully you don't have to put 9 plus 6 into your calculator, but if you have to, you know what, at least you'll get the answer right. 3 times 5 is 15. 15 plus 6 is 21. Okay, so all we're doing to get our y values is just plug it. We choose the x values. We chose them. We completely came up with them. You plug those in, and then you'll get some number, and that number is our y value. So that means that for the equation y equals 3x plus 6, these are 4 of the points that will be on the graph. Okay, now, when dealing with multiple choice problems, you will need to compare your table to the answer choices, okay? So when you get this kind of problem on like the STAR test, you might get 4 different tables as the answer choices. So you need to make your table and then figure out, okay, which of these tables is the right answer? Which one of them kind of matches what I did, right? In order to make your comparison easier, you want to choose X values that you see in the answer choice tables. If you don't do this, it'll be hard to tell whether your table matches any of the answer choices. So this page is really more of a test-taking strategy than math, technically, right? We're all about that. We want y'all to do well in these tests, right? So let's see an example. It says, which table contains corresponding x values and y values where the value of y is 2 more than the product of x and 3? Doesn't this sound a little bit familiar to the problem we just did? Except it has a different y-intercept, right? So we have 4 tables. We need to figure out which of these tables is correct, like it matches this equation. And so to do that, we're going to make our own table and see what happens. Okay. I'm just going to write a little table. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. Now, here's the part where we choose our x values. And before, like on the last 2 practice problems, we just chose whatever the heck x values we wanted to choose. But now we need to be more strategic about this, because like let's say you choose 0, 1, -1. Oops. Kind of like I did earlier. Here's the problem with that. None of these tables have 0 as one of the x values. So you'll do the calculation, and that's not going to help you a whole lot because you won't know if it was right or wrong, right? So you want to choose x values that are here in these answer choices, right? Oh, I got a little ahead of myself. Let's do the equation first. Y is 2 more than the product of x and 3. So like I said, is very similar to the last example we did. Except now we're going to have to be more strategic with our x's. So what you want to do is look at your answer choices and find x values that come up multiple times. Like for example, if we choose 5 as our x value, 5 shows up in 3 of these tables. So that means that if we choose 5 as one of the x values, we'll be able to narrow it down a whole lot. Okay, let's go ahead and try that. Y equals 2 plus 3 times 5. So y equals 2 plus 15, which is 17. So that means that when x is 5, y should be 17. A fits the bill. B has y equals 1. That's wrong. C has y equals 23 instead of 17. That's wrong. Now, we don't know if the answer is A or D because D does not have 5 as one of the x values, but we have managed to narrow it down to 50-50. So if you were to just guess right now, don't recommend it, but if you were to just guess right now, you'd have a 50-50 chance. So for us to narrow it down between A and D, now we want to choose one of these values from D, right? Because A and D, unfortunately, don't have any x values in common. So let's just choose one of these x values from D to see if D works out. Let's just do 2. I'll do a different color so you can see it, I guess. Right? Y equals 2 plus 3 times 2. That's y equals 2 plus 6, which is 8. This is not 8. It's supposed to be 8. So now we cancel out D. The answer is A. So if you're strategic about this, you could do these problems. You see, we only had to plug in 2 x values to find the right answer. Now, if you wanted to go ahead of time and just pick out more x's, then you could, but you can be very strategic with this and do less work and still get the same answer. I'm all about that kind of purposeful laziness. All right. Okay. So the next pages have some practice problems for you. There was one that I wanted to go over with you because it's a little bit different from the ones that we did previously. Okay, and that is, let's look at number 2. Number 2 says, the value of y is 10 less than the product of x and 5. Now we know product means x. Less than, you can guess, when you have 10 of something, or no, let's say you have something and then the next day you have 10 less than what you had the day before, you're subtracting. However, this is where you have to be careful. You cannot write this as 10 minus 5x. This is not saying 10 minus. It says the value of y is 10 less than the product. So that means you have this product of 5 and x and you have 10 less than it. Like let's treat this like a number. Let's say that this is 20. The value of y is 10 less than 20. You wouldn't say 10 minus 20. You're saying 20 minus 10 because you have 20 and then you have 10 less than 20. So this is where it's really important. The order. This is not right. It is 10 less than the product of x and 5. So this is 5x minus 10. Okay. Remember, with subtraction, order does matter. 5x minus 10 is very different from 10 minus 5x. When you do 10 minus 5x, you're saying that the slope is negative 5. Erase this so you can see it. When you have 10 minus 5x, you're saying the slope is negative 5 and positive 10 is the y-intercept. Whereas with this, the slope is positive 5 and negative 10 is the y-intercept. These are two very different equations. So do not do this. That is bad. That is very bad juju. Okay. So this is our equation. Let's choose our x values. Y equals 5 times 0 minus 10. That's 0 minus 10 is negative 10. Y equals 5 times 1 minus 10. That's saying 5 minus 10 is negative 5. And so on to complete the table. 5 times 2 minus 10. 5 times 3 minus 10. 15 minus 10 is 5. Now this might vary if you choose different numbers. That's the same idea. So be very careful with the less than, with the subtraction. Okay. And then the rest of these should be pretty straightforward and similar to the other examples. And then of course, when you get to the end of the notes, don't forget to summarize the lesson, because I look at that for the notebook check. Okay. All right. Well, I hope that this was useful for you. I tried to keep it short and sweet. I will see you in class. Have a good one.